Welcome to this new episode of Out from the Horrorbox. I'm your host, Dom. This episode will be a little bit lighter than normal. I've been working on completing the last episode in our retrospective series on the Halloween franchise. I ran into some technical difficulties while recording the audio, and now I'm having to start all over with that, which is a little frustrating because I really wanted to have it done. I thought I was going to have it done today and up for you guys. So it's Saturday today and ready for everyone to go and listen to it. But, that just didn't happen. A lot of the audio was lost in certain parts, so I have to redo pretty much everything that I did. So now I'm going to have to just put this out really quick. And, I'm just not going to get too much further into it. We're just going to jump right in and look at some cryptids, more cryptids across the U.S., and then end off with some chilling tales. So, let's see what comes out from the horror box. There are so many strange things out there. UFOs and lights in the sky. Ghostly figures haunting the places we call home. Something out in the dark that goes bump in the night. What has always intrigued me is that cryptids are seen all over the world. They have been a part of folklore, a local legend, and even the stories we tell ourselves to stay calm when we hear something just past the light. Are these undiscovered animals? Extraterrestrials? Interdimensional beings? Only time will tell what will be discovered. In this continuation of our series on cryptids across the U.S., we start in the woods of New Jersey, then to rural Kentucky, down the roads of Ohio and Massachusetts, and ending with the Ozarks in Kansas. Our journey into the unknown begins now. In the forests of the Pine Barrens in South Jersey, there is a creature that is often described as a flying biped with hooves. Now known widely as the Jersey Devil, also known as the Leeds Devil, this legendary creature is commonly described as a bipedal kangaroo-like or wyvern-like creature with a horse or goat-like head, leathery bat wings, horns, small arms with clawed hands, legs with cloven hooves, and a forked or pointed tail. It has been reported to move quickly and is often described as emitting a high-pitched, blood-curdling scream. The Lenape people who originally inhabited the Pine Barrens believe that the area was inhabited by a spirit called Msing, which sometimes took the form of a deer-like creature with leathery wings. According to popular folklore, the Jersey Devil originated with a Pine Barrens resident named Jane Leeds, known as Mother Leeds. The legend states that Mother Leeds had 12 children, and after finding she was pregnant for the 13th time, cursed the child in frustration, crying that the child would be born a devil. In 1735, Mother Leeds was in labor on a stormy night while her friends gathered around her. Born as a normal child, the 13th child changed into a creature with hooves, a goat's head, bat wings, and forked tail. Growling and screaming, the child beat everyone with its tail before flying up the chimney and heading out into the pines. In some versions of the tale, Mother Leeds was supposedly a witch, and the child's father was the devil. Some versions of the legend also state that there was a subsequent attempt by local clergymen to exorcise the creature from the Pine Barrens. Prior to the 1900s, the Jersey Devil was referred to as the Leeds Devil or the Devil of Leeds, either in connection with the local Leeds family or the southern New Jersey town Leeds Point. The Mother Leeds that was in the story has been identified by some as the real-life Deborah Leeds, on grounds that Deborah Leeds' husband, Japhet Leeds, named 12 children in the will he wrote during 1736, which is compatible with the legend. Deborah and Japhet Leeds also lived in the Leeds Point section of what is now Atlantic County, New Jersey, which is commonly the location of the Jersey Devil story. The truth behind the legend, from Brian Regal, a historian of science at Keene University, theorizes that the story of Mother Leeds could be from colonial-era political intrigue involving early New Jersey politicians Benjamin Franklin and Franklin's rival almanac publisher Daniel Leeds. Much like Mother Leeds of the Jersey Devil myth, Daniel Leeds' third wife had given birth to 9 children, a large number of children even for the time. Leeds and his family were prominent in the South Jersey and Pine Barrens area. As a royal surveyor with strong allegiance to the British Crown, Leeds had surveyed and acquired land in the Egg Harbor area, located within the Pine Barrens. Starting in the 17th century, English Quakers established settlements in southern New Jersey, the region in which the Pine Barrens are located. Daniel Leeds, a Quaker and prominent person of pre-revolutionary colonial southern New Jersey, became ostracized by his congregation after his publication of almanacs containing astrological symbols and writings. Leeds' fellow Quakers deemed these almanacs as too pagan or blasphemous, and the almanacs were censored and destroyed by the local Quaker community. In response to and in spite of the censorship, Leeds continued to publish even more esoteric astrological Christian writings and became increasingly fascinated with Christian occultism, Christian mysticism, cosmology, demonology, and angelology, and natural magic. All of this, and also converting to Anglicanism, may have helped facilitate the legend of the Leeds Devil and the association of the Leeds family with the devils and monsters. There have been many claims of sightings and occurrences involving the Jersey Devil. According to legend, while visiting the Hanover Mill Works to inspect his cannonballs being forged, Commodore Stephen Decanter sighted a flying creature and fired a cannonball directly upon it, to no effect. Then there's Joseph Bonaparte, elder brother of Napoleon, who claimed to have seen the Jersey Devil while out hunting on his Bordentown estate in 1820. During 1840, the Jersey Devil was blamed for several livestock killings. Similar attacks were reported during 1841, accompanied by tracks and screams. In Greenwich Township, in December 1925, a local farmer shot an unidentified animal as it attempted to steal his chickens. He then photographed the corpse. Afterwards, he claimed that of the 100 people he showed, it could not be identified. On July 27, 1937, an unknown animal with red eyes, seen by residents of Downingtown, Pennsylvania, was compared to the Jersey Devil by a reporter from the Pennsylvania Bulletin. In 1951, a group of Gibsontown, New Jersey boys claimed to have seen a monster matching the devil's description, and claims of a corpse matching the Jersey Devil's description arose in 1957. During 1960, tracks and noises heard near Mays Landing were claimed to be from the Jersey Devil. During that same year, the merchants around Camden offered a $10,000 reward for the capture of the Jersey Devil, even offering to build a private zoo to house the creature if it was captured. Skeptics believe the Jersey Devil to partially be nothing more than a creative manifestation upon the imaginations of the early English settlers to South Jersey, with possible natural explanations including boogeyman stories created and told by bored Pine Barren residents as a form of child's entertainment, the byproduct of historical local disdain for the Leeds family, the misidentification of known animals, and rumors based on common negative perception of the local rural populations of the Pine Barrens, also known as Pineys. The frightening reputation of the Pine Barrens may indeed have contributed to the Jersey Devil legend. Historically, the Pine Barrens was considered inhospitable land. Gangs of highwaymen, such as the politically disdained Loyalist brigands, known as the Pine Robbers, were known to rob and attack travelers passing through the Barrens. During the 1700s and 1800s, residents of the isolated Pine Barrens were deemed the dregs or outcasts of society. Poor farmers, fugitives, brigands, Native Americans, poachers, moonshiners, runaway slaves, and deserter soldiers. So-called Pineys have sometimes fostered certain frightening stories about themselves and the Pine Barrens to discourage outsiders or intruders from entering the Barrens. Pineys were further demonized and vilified after 2 eugenic studies were published during the early 20th century which depicted Pineys as congenital idiots and criminals, as seen in the research performed on the Kelly-Hopkinsville family by Henry H. Goddard, which is now considered biased, inaccurate, unscientific, and most likely falsified. I did not know that they did that to these people. Wow. That's kind of crazy, especially somewhere in the north like that. That's something more that they would do. Well, I mean, this is America. So I guess they do. You do eugenics across the board in the early 20th century. That makes sense. Jeff Brunner of the Humane Society of New Jersey thinks that the Sandhill crane is partially the basis for the Jersey Devil stories, adding, there are no photographs, no bones, no hard evidence whatsoever, and worst of all, no explanation of its origins. It doesn't require belief in the supernatural. Outdoorsman and author Tom Brown Jr. spent several seasons living in the wilderness of the Pine Barrens. He recounts occasions when terrified hikers mistook him for the Jersey Devil after he covered his whole body with mud to repel mosquitoes, which is kind of funny because it's like he like basically pulled a predator. Well, not the Predator, but like an Arnold Schwarzenegger in the Predator to get away from the mosquitoes, which is a really good way to get them to leave you alone, the mosquitoes. Due in part to the isolated and undeveloped nature of the Pine Barrens, they fostered various folk legends. Apart from the Jersey Devil, many other legends are associated with the Pine Barrens. Supernatural creatures and ghosts said to haunt the pine forest include the ghost of the pirate Captain Kidd, who supposedly buried treasure in the Pine Barrens and is sometimes allegedly seen in the company of the Jersey Devil, which is awesome. I did not know that. Like, that'd be so cool. It's like a pirate and his cryptid mate. Arr. The ghost of the Black Doctor, the benevolent spirit of an African-American doctor who, after being forbidden from practicing medicine due to his race, yep, that sounds like America, entered the Pine Barrens to practice medicine in the isolated communities of the Barrens and is said to still come to the aid of lost or injured travelers. And that's just like any person of color who had to or was forced, to move to this like area where they're like, yeah, there, you go help them. And then they even in the afterlife, he still helps people even though they mistreated him. The ghost of the black dog, which, unlike many black dog legends, is usually portrayed as harmless. Wow, I did not know that. The ghost of the golden-haired girl, the spirit of a girl who is said to be staring out into the sea, dressed in white, mourning the loss of her lover at sea, which kind of sounds like a lot of tales we hear from around the world of like these like women who, or people in white who hang around near either like the sea or rivers or like lakes and like any body of water, and that's kind of a cautionary tale to tell the locals and like your children to keep them away from going near the water because they'll drown. And then there's also the white stag, a ghostly white deer set to rescue travelers in the Barrens from danger. There are also folk tales concerning the Blue Hole, an unusually clear blue and rounded body of water located in the Pine Barrens between Monroe Township, Gloucester County, and Winslow Township, Camden County. Ugh. And often associated with the Jersey Devil. So let's move on to our next cryptid. At the Sutton family farmhouse on the evening of Sunday, August 21st, 1955, the residents, which included Glennie Langford, her children Lonnie, Carlton, and Mary, 2 sons from a previous marriage, Elmer Lucky Sutton, and John Charlie J.C. Sutton, their respective wives Vera and Aileen, Aileen's brother O.P. Baker, and Billy Ray Taylor and his wife June. Both the Taylors, Lucky, and Vera Sutton were reportedly itinerant carnival workers who were visiting the farmhouse. They claimed to have an encounter with strange little aliens that led to a shootout. Billy Ray Taylor had gone out to the well for some water and saw a round metallic object in the sky. After coming back into the house, he told everyone, and everyone said it was a prank. He tried to convince Lucky Sutton that what he'd seen was real. After going back to the well and not finding anything, they headed back to the farmhouse. That's when they saw something that stopped them in their tracks. Something glowing was approaching from the woods. It got closer, and they saw it was a small humanoid creature with long ears, and it seemed to float towards the pair. They ran inside and grabbed their guns. Glennie didn't understand what the commotion was about. She lived on the property for decades and never experienced anything even remotely strange, but didn't want to upset his younger siblings, so she sent them to bed. The next thing she knew, the guys were standing at guard at the door, Lucky at the front with a 12 gauge and Billy Ray at the back with a 22. They were sitting there silently waiting, while everyone else except Lucky and the children talked in the living room, when a figure about 3 feet tall appeared in the doorway out of the darkness. Glennie screamed and everyone came running. Billy Ray shot at the would-be intruder, piercing a hole in the screen door. Then, spurred by curiosity, he stepped onto the porch. As he did, he says a clawed hand reached out from the roof, grazing his hair. Not knowing the creature's intent, Aileen grabbed Billy Ray and yanked him back inside the house. Lucky stepped out, aiming his gun at the roof. The creature he shot rolled off the roof and disappeared into the woods, apparently uninjured. In the living room, a pair of glowing eyes and a set of talons appeared on the window. JC shot at it through the glass with a 12-gauge shotgun. Close behind, Billy Ray followed up with a bullet. The struck creature backflipped and took off running. Sutton and Billy Ray Taylor claimed that they had been shooting at 12 to 15 short, dark figures who repeatedly popped up at the doorway or peered into the windows. They said they had been holding them off with gunfire for nearly 4 hours. Back in the house, the group tried to collect their thoughts amidst racing questions. What are these things? Were they goblins or demons? Did their raised arms indicate innocent intent? If they didn't mean any harm to the home's occupants, why did they keep coming back after being shot? Bullets may not have scared the intruders off, but someone pointed out that bright light seemed to hurt their large, yellow-pupiled eyes. Whenever a light came on, the beings backed away. They turned on every light in the house and waited. Outside, it was eerily silent. One of the children began to cry. Lucky was trying to think of what to do next when they heard scratching coming from the roof. He darted outside, pointed his gun at the top of the house, and fired at the creature there. The being floated down and scrambled out of sight beyond the trees, seemingly unharmed like the others. It was becoming abundantly clear that these goblins couldn't be deterred, at least not by any means an ordinary farm family had at their disposal. It was time to get out of there. When the coast was clear, everyone made a break for the trucks, piling in as fast as they could. Concerned about a possible gun battle between local citizens, 4 city police officers, 5 state troopers, 3 deputy sheriffs, and 4 military police officers from the nearby United States Army Fort Campbell drove to the Sutton farmhouse located near the town of Kelly in Christian County. Their search yielded nothing apart from evidence of gunfire and holes in window and door screens made by firearms. The next day, neighbors told 2 officers that the family had packed up and left after claiming the creatures had returned about 3:30 in the morning. The Kelly-Hopkinsville encounter, also known as the Hopkinsville Goblin case or Kelly Green Man case, was a close encounter with extraterrestrial beings near the communities of Kelly and Hopkinsville in Christian County, Kentucky. Ufologists regard it as one of the most significant and well-documented cases in the history of UFO incidents, while skeptics say the reports were due to the effects of excitement and misidentification of natural phenomena such as meteors and owls. The United States Air Force classified the alleged incident as a hoax in the Project Blue Book files. Psychologists have used the alleged incident as an academic example of pseudoscience to help students distinguish truth from fiction. The family's claims received widespread coverage in local and national press. Earlier articles did not refer to little green men, The color was later added to some newspaper stories. Estimates of the size of the alleged creature vary from 2 to 4 feet, and details such as large pointed ears, claw-like hands, eyes that glowed yellow, and spindly legs later appeared in various media. French ufologist Renaud Lassette argued in a publication that the best explanation of the case is that the residents had simply seen great horned owls. Ufologist Jerome Clark writes that the supposed creatures floated through the trees and the sounds of bullets striking them resembled bullets striking a metal bucket. Clark describes an odd luminous patch along a fence where one of the beings had been shot, and in the woods beyond, a green light whose source could not be determined. However, this description was consistent with foxfire, a bioluminescent fungus on decaying wood. Clark also wrote that investigations by police, Air Force officers from nearby Fort Campbell, and civilian ufologists found no evidence of a hoax. However, Brian Dunning reported, the claim that Air Force investigators showed up the next day at Mrs. Langford's house has been published a number of times by later authors, but I can find no corroborating evidence of this. Dunning also observed the 4 military police who accompanied the police officers on the night of the event were from an Army base, not an Air Force base. Some ufologists compared the alleged creatures to gremlins, which have since often been referred to as the Hopkinsville Goblins in popular culture. Ufologist Alan Hedry wrote, this case is distinguished by its duration and also by the number of witnesses involved. Project Blue Book listed the case as a hoax with no further comment. Psychologists Rodney Schmaltz and Scott Lilienfeld cite the alleged incident as an example of pseudoscience and an extraordinary claim to help students develop critical thinking skills. Although contemporary newspaper stories alleged that all officials appeared to agree that there was no drinking involved, Schmaltz and Lilienfeld suggest that intoxication may have played a part in the sighting, which I honestly, from things that I've heard and digging into this a little bit more and listening to some other podcasts, I don't think there was any kind of drinking or intoxication at all. I'm not saying that this actually, what they saw actually were what they saw. There's certain things about it that it's like, well, that kind of sounds a little ridiculous, especially for people who live in this area and, more than likely have encountered like birds or animals in this area, and they've hunted them probably, so they know what kind of, like, if they're shooting at them, what they should make, the sounds that they should be hearing, whatever, like if it's making a metallic sound, that's a little weird. But as Committee for Skeptical Inquiry member and skeptic Joe Nickel noted, that the family could have misidentified eagle owls or great horned owls, which are nocturnal, fly silently, have yellow eyes, and aggressively defend their nests. According to Nickel, meteor sightings also occurred at the time that could explain Billy Ray Taylor's claim that he saw a bright light streak across the sky and disappear beyond a tree line some distance from the house. Author Brian Dunning noted the height of the owls would be comparable to at least the lower end of the rapport. There are simply too many similarities between the creatures reported by the families and an aggressive pair of the local great horned owls, which do stand about 2/3 of a meter tall. And yeah, I would like to agree with thinking that maybe it were owls. The only problem, I disagree because it's like, yeah, the height, that they fly silently, and that like the eyes and everything, and then like, I mean, the talons that they saw too could be like, that's what they could have mistaken for like their hands or whatever. But then there's other things like when they say that like they shot it and it ricocheted, or like they would, like when they would fall back and they would like float back. But like if you shot, how many owls were out there? Like they said that they had to defend the house for like 4 hours from them, and if there's only an owl or two, maybe okay, which is what you probably think, but like, so then there has to be more than just two. There has to be like a couple or something beyond that, right? Like 4 or 5 at least, because they were shooting one and it goes flying back, right? Then where are the other ones? And then the reports are like the metallic sound, and like I don't know. There's just some things about it that seem a little weird. There's just some things that it's like, okay, well, it could be that, but in all honesty, I don't know where to land on this one. I always like the story because it does have a lot of like weird things about it, but then there's some things that it's like, okay, maybe they're just a couple of hicks that didn't know what they were talking about. Either way, we'll move on to the next cryptid. On March 3rd, 1972, at 1 a.m., Ray Shockey, a Loveland police officer, was driving on Riverside Drive near a boot factory and the Little Miami River when an unidentified animal scurried across the road in front of his vehicle. The animal was fully illuminated in his vehicle's headlights, and he described it as 3 to 4 feet long and about 50 to 75 pounds, with leathery skin. He reported spotting the animal crouched like a frog before it momentarily stood erect to climb over the guardrail and back down towards the river. According to various legends, the creature was first sighted by a businessman or a traveling salesman driving along the unnamed road late at night in 1955, with some versions of the story specifying the month of May. In one story, the driver was heading out of the Branch Hill neighborhood when he spotted 3 figures stood erect on their hind legs along the side of the road, each 3 to 4 feet in height, with leathery skin and frog faces. In other versions of the story, the creatures were spotted under or over a poorly lit bridge, and one held a wand over its head that fired a spray of spark. 2 weeks later after the incident, a second Loveland police officer, Mark Matthews, reported seeing an unidentified animal crouched along the road in the same vicinity as Shockey's sighting. Matthews shot the animal, recovered the body, and put it in the trunk to show Officer Shockey. According to Matthews, it was a large iguana about 3 to 3.5 feet long, and he didn't immediately recognize it because it was missing its tail. Matthews speculated that the iguana had been someone's pet that either got loose or was released when it grew too large. According to Matthews, Shockey was shown the dead iguana and confirmed it was the animal he had seen 2 weeks previously. Matthews recounted the incident to an author of a book about urban legends, but says the author omitted the part that confirmed that the creature was an iguana rather than a frogman. Matthews also recounted the frogman story in 2016, again on WCPO Channel 9. In Ohio folklore, the Loveland Frog, also known as the Loveland Frogman or Loveland Lizard, is a legendary humanoid frog described as standing roughly 4 feet and allegedly spotted in Loveland, Ohio. In 1972, the Loveland Frog legend gained renewed attention when a Loveland police officer reported to a colleague that he had seen an animal consistent with the description of the Frogman. After a reported sighting in 2016, the second officer called a news station to report that he had shot and killed the same creature some weeks after the 1972 incident and had identified it as a large iguana that was missing its tail. University of Cincinnati folklore professor Edgar Slotkin compared the Loveland Frog to Paul Bunyan, saying that the stories about it have been passed down for several decades and that sighting reports seem to come in predictable cycles. In May 2014, the Loveland Frog legend was made into a musical titled Hot Damn, It's the Loveland Frog. In 2019, artist Dog Died created a song called Hot Damn, It's the Loveland Frog. So let's hop on over to the next cryptid. The Dover Demon was first sighted on the night of April 21st, 1977, by 3 17-year-old boys who were driving through the Massachusetts area. Bill Bartlett, the driver, reported that when the car's headlights illuminated something, he thought at first it was a dog or cat, but upon closer inspection realized it was a bizarre, unearthly-looking creature crawling along a stone wall on Farm Street. Bartlett continued to watch the creature and reported it to have a disproportionately large watermelon-shaped head and illuminated orange eyes, like glass marbles. It had long, thin arms and legs with slender fingers, which it used to grasp onto the pavement. It was hairless and had rough, flesh-toned skin, described as tan and sandpaper-like. The creature's appearance was very plain, with no nose or ears and no mouth was seen. The witness drawings portray its head as having a skull shape, forming the contour of a circle on top, with a more elliptical ending projecting down to include where the nose and mouth would be. The Dover demon was also thought to become invisible or translucent in the night. The creature was sighted again an hour later by John Baxter, who was 15, and Pete Mitchell, 13, as they were walking home. Baxter said it was bipedal and ended up running into a gully and standing next to a tree. The next day, April 22nd, 1977, Abby Bromham, 15, and Will Traintor, 18, claimed to have seen a similar-looking creature from Traintor's car on the side of the road. Bromham's description matched Bartlett's and Baxter's descriptions, except this time the cryptid had illuminated green eyes. She approximated its height as about the size of a goat. Investigators attempted to shake up Mrs. Bromham by noting that she said it had green eyes reflected by car headlights, while Bartlett mentioned orange eyes reflected back to him by his automobile's lights. Miss Bromham was steadfast in her description. Bartlett, Baxter, Bromham, and Traintor all drew sketches of the monstrous sight shortly after their sightings. On the piece of paper that includes Bartlett's sketch, he wrote, "I, Bill Bartlett, swear on a stack of Bibles that I saw this creature." The Dover demon is an alleged cryptozoological creature that was sighted on 3 separate occasions in the town of Dover, Massachusetts. It has remained a subject of interest for cryptozoologists ever since then. Cryptozoologist Lauren Coleman was the initial investigator and the individual who named the creature the Dover demon. It was disseminated by the press, and the name stuck. Coleman quickly assembled and brought into the inquiry 3 other investigators, Joseph Nyman, Ed Fogg, and Walter Webb. All were well-known ufological researchers in eastern Massachusetts, with Webb being the assistant director of the Hayden Planetarium at Boston Science Museum. Coleman did not feel he was necessarily dealing with a ufological phenomenon, but he wanted to have seasoned investigators with good interviewing skills to do a comprehensive examination of the eyewitnesses and their families, as well as law enforcement, educational, and community members. By day, it hid deep in the forests of Dover, Massachusetts. Other witnesses have claimed the creature had green eyes and seemingly smooth, chalky gray-toned skin, 3 feet tall, and made a blood-curdling noise, similar to a hawk's screech, combined with a snake's hiss. But all witnesses say it had no ears, mouth, nose, or known sex. Witnesses also agree that it stalks in the trees and waits to scare its next victim. I don't know how they got all that information about, not about what it looks like, but that it hides and stalks its next victim and all that. I don't know if it's been seen beyond that. It does, when you look at the drawing, it's whoa, that looks alien. And like Lauren Coleman said, he doesn't know if necessarily you're dealing with something ufological, but it definitely looks like your typical gray alien. So let's get on to our last cryptid for the day. The Ozark Howler, or the Ozark Black Howler, legend has been passed down for generations by locals who have heard things that they could not describe and have seen things that they couldn't be described as an animal that you would expect to find in the heart of the Ozark wilderness. Its frightening sound and eerie appearance has been seen in the more remote parts of the Missourian and Arkansas Ozarks and even further west in Oklahoma and South Texas. It is typically described as being around the size of a bear with a thick body, stocky legs, black shaggy hair, and having prominent horns. Most agree that it's either black or dark in color. Its cry is often described as a combination of a wolf's howl and an elk's bugle. Skeptics claim that it's an eastern cougar, a black bear, or some kind of wolf or feral hound. Sightings have been officially recorded since the 1950s, though many Ozark families can pass on stories of their parents and grandparents experiencing the chill of seeing the Ozark Howler well before that time. Between 2005 and 2010, the Howler, also known as the Black Howler and the Devil Cat, was spotted several times. A family living north of Van Buren in the Boston Mountains of Crawford County set out trail cams after spotting what they believed was a cougar. The images they supplied to a Fort Smith television station appeared to show a big cat similar to a cougar or a mountain lion. The problem is that Wildlife officials maintain there is not a breeding population of cougars left in Arkansas. They do concede that it's possible there might be individual big cats living in the mountains, pointing out they likely were once held as pets but escaped or were turned loose by their owners. The howl, as you might expect, is the hallmark of the Ozark Howler. Its sound has been described as very deep and guttural, as well as high-pitched howl. Others have said that it's the most unearthly scream and half-human. One of the most common descriptions of sound is that it's like the screams of a woman. Those who have heard the screams pierce the night never forget the chill that ran up their spine and the feeling of dread that washed over them. Scottish, Irish, Welsh, and English settlers homesteaded the Ozark Plateau in the mid to late 1800s, and they brought with them their ancestral stories and mythologies. One such story is of I'm 100% sure that I'm going to mispronounce this because I am not from that area of the world, and I know I'm not pronouncing this right. I'm going to just go ahead and start. Kusith, a mythological hound that is feared as a harbinger of death. The settlers believed that the hound would come to bear away the soul of a person to the afterlife, similar to the Grim Reaper. The Hounds of Death went by other names, such as, and I'm going to butcher these also, because I have no idea how you're actually supposed to pronounce it, because Irish and Welsh, the letters and words never actually make up what you're supposed to pronounce it. So I'm going to go ahead. Bean City, that's Irish. Q City, and that's, I guess, Irish. And then Suwin, Ananu. I know I'm just pronouncing the letters the way I know how to pronounce them, and that's Welsh, but I'm pretty sure that's not how you pronounce it. According to Scottish folklore, the Kusith is said to be the size of a young bull with the appearance of a wolf. Its fur is shaggy and usually cited as being dark green, though sometimes white. Its tail is described as being long and either coiled or up or plaited or like braided. Its paws are described as being the width of a man's hand. According to Welsh folklore, their growling is loudest when they are at a distance, and they draw nearer. It growls softer and softer. Their coming is generally seen as a death portent. Some people see a connection between the mythologies that came here with the settlers and the ancient stories of the native people who inhabited the region. Natives told stories of saber-toothed tigers that used to roam the land, though they have been gone for thousands of years. Combining the stories of the tigers and the settlers' tales of otherworldly creatures that scream and carry off the souls of the dead may have resulted in the Ozark Howler, which that's pretty American right there, just like this kind of mixing of the culture over time and the things that they kind of hear, and then they kind of give it a similar, like, oh, it's this, and then it just over time becomes the Ozark Howler. Time to wrap these cryptids up. We added 5 more unknown creatures to our list. What do you think people are seeing? Are they just animals that people are mistaking for something more? Why are some seen more than others? Could they be spirits like how our ancestors saw angels and demons? Possibly. They could be interdimensional beings or beings of a higher dimension, something passing us by, and this is all we can comprehend. We may never know. There are multiple sides to every story, and even if the explanation is something mundane, I love to read and listen to these encounters. And there are so many things out there that we still don't know and will remain unknown. So remember, keep your eyes open, check every shadow. Alright, to end this lighter episode, we have 10 chilling tales from the internet. Turn your lights down low and listen, if you dare. Our first tale is called Tallman. As an officer on a reservation, we kept getting reports of a tall man at different places in town on our reservation. One night we were able to catch it on a thermal camera. There was about 8 to 10 officers there. It was on a hill overlooking the town that was right below. They were tall, about 8 to 9 feet, with long dark hair and a human face. It was really fast and quick. We sent officers that were in the town over towards it as it was walking towards the neighborhood. We could see the officer get out and cross the fence and look with his flashlight, but it looked like the figure was in a slight ravine to his side and couldn't see it. We were giving directions on the radio, but our portable radio sucked, and unless you were right next to your unit, they wouldn't work. We watched as the tall figure walked right down the middle of the street and could hear all the dogs in the houses start freaking out. It then walked out of sight. In our culture, we have a name for it. The poster didn't say what the name was. The name translates in English to older brother. But when we first started seeing him around our residence, we all just called him George, so it wouldn't scare the younger kids. Funny, I know, but it just made him seem less scary. We always say that he's more scared of us than he is of you. The next story is called Ghosts Aren't Real. Back in the house I used to live in as a kid, a lot of paranormal stuff used to happen. This was around 2005 to 2009, so it wasn't too far back. Anyway, when we first moved in for like the few first weeks, everything was normal, but one night my parents were arguing, I forget why, and some pans ended up falling near the sink, making a pretty loud noise. And after that night, every night around 12, we would hear the same sound of falling pans around the sink. And soon after that started happening at random times of the night, you would hear the chair start being pulled. Now, when we first moved in, I was 4 or 5, and when we moved out, I was 9. So I came to get used to these sounds and started telling myself, oh, it's just the pans falling again. Mom must have set them in a weird way in the sink again. But never really had an explanation for the chairs moving. On multiple occasions, I would stay up late watching TV and get scared. Sometimes I would get brave enough to stand in the dark where the chairs were, hoping to see what was causing them to move. But just like there were no pans falling for the sound to be heard, no chairs moved, and I would still hear the sounds. There was this one instance that me and my siblings always end up talking about because it caused us to get in trouble. This was on some random school day, and our dad had called us on the home phone to tell us to clean around the house because it was getting messy. So we did what we normally did to tidy up the place. One of the things we did was gather all the socks and put them in a laundry basket in my sister's room. All 3 of us did this, and that was the last thing we ended up doing. When we were done, we hung around the living room watching TV until our dad got home 30 minutes later. After talking to us and asking us if we had done what he told us, he went through the house checking our rooms and the other rooms to see if we really did what he told us to do. So one thing about my dad is that he has really bad anger issues, and he was verbally abusive to my sisters and I throughout most of our childhoods, and on some occasions he would hit my older sister and me with a belt. Sometimes we would lie to him so that we wouldn't get in trouble. So he checked our rooms, and when he got to my sister's room, he lost it in anger because there were socks all over the room, like on the bed and all over the floor. We swore to him that we had picked them up and put them in a basket, but my dad still got angry at us due to the fact that there were socks everywhere, calling us incompetent, telling us we were useless, and that we were pieces of shit. That was just one of the many things that happened in that house. I heard my name being whispered by my sister even though she was asleep. My sister always used to say that she could see a skull when she would stare at the curtains in her room, and I couldn't see anything even though I was right there next to her. Every single friend or cousin of mine that would stay over said we had ghosts, but I would always deny it, maybe for my own sanity, by saying, ghosts aren't real, stupid. Our next tale is called 3:14 a.m. This happened to me around 2006 or 2007 in the summertime. My family and friends lived pretty remotely in the middle of nowhere, near woods, trails, and cornfields. During school, my friend told me about how her family decided to adopt a new religion, whatever that meant. She explained her family went into the big city to speak to a religious zealot or medium who can see stuff that we can't. She told me that this medium knew there was a trail that led behind her house and knew there was a cornfield mixed in with the woods and as well as behind her house. Nothing spooky about that. Seems pretty common knowledge given the area. Well, the medium also told her that there's a demon or extraterrestrial mythological creature that manifests itself behind their home in the woods around 3:14 a.m. in the morning, and it tries to communicate through my friend, and thus why she has chronic hiccups. Now, of course, when she told me all of this, I didn't buy into any of it and thought it would be a perfect opportunity to scare my other friends who were girls in my class. We were all friends, but I liked one of the girls, and that part is irrelevant to the story. Anyway, so I explained the story to two of my friends, and we decided we would go out to the woods that night behind my other friend's house in hopes to see this demon or whatever. The girls drove their car over to my house because we could walk to the trails from my house with no problem around 2:30 a.m. Took us about 15 minutes of walking to get to the location. The way the trail forms was pretty spooky because the trees kind of hooked over us, forming a tunnel of leaves and limbs. It was extremely clear that night, and the sound of insects and the wildlife was very prevalent, so it wasn't that creepy. Time goes on, and I'm sitting on the ground, and one friend is playing on her flip phone, and the girl I liked was talking to me. 3:14 a.m. rolls around, and I start taunting whatever this thing is, and I start throwing rocks in the cornfields and the woods nearby. About 5 minutes pass, and we decide to head back. No longer did it take for me to stand up and take 3 steps. Everything around us got dead silent. No crickets chirping, no movement. Out of the blue, about 6 feet in front of us to the right, a large branch snaps in two, and we hear the most ominous growl I have ever heard in my life. I lived here my whole life and hunted. I have never heard an animal sound like that. By the sound of the limb snap, we fully expected to see something step out of the brush and greet us. Nothing did. The girls jumped behind me, and we just stared at the spot for a solid minute trying to comprehend what it was. We couldn't see a damn thing. It was pitch black, and our little flip-flops didn't have a flashlight like the new phones have. I took a few pebbles on the ground and chucked them in the direction of the noise. Nothing. I decided it wasn't worth the risk of the girls' safety to head the direction we came, so I told them to run the other way, and I'll lag behind just in case if it's a predator that likes to chase. It'll get to me first. As soon as they took off, absolutely nothing followed us. We managed to cut through the woods and onto a road that led by my house. We got back home around 4 a.m. To this day, I have absolutely no idea what it was. We went back a year later, and nothing ever occurred again. I still hear the growl in my head, and it sends chills down my arm. Moving on to the next tale. This one's called Grandma Wasn't There. This situation changed my mind on the paranormal forever. So one day, I have no idea what day it was. It was a little bit ago now, but it'll never leave me for as long as I live. I was taking my ex-girlfriend home after a long day. It was her mom's house or something. Quite a quiet area down a tight road, if you understand what I'm saying. Not the nicest of places to live, but oh well. So we finally drive down, and I reverse into this little parking area, and we chat a little before the door opens with her 2 sisters in the distance, her dog, or their dog, who knows, her family weren't the most connected, and her grandma. They were watching my car, waiting for my ex to get out and go inside. I kissed goodbye and watched over at her family because I was curious. I go home for the night, and I believe the next day we meet back up and spend the day together. On the night when we pull up and go inside mine after our long day, I say it was nice seeing your sisters and your grandma. My ex just looks at me in confusion. What do you mean, my grandma? She wasn't there. It was just my sisters. At this point, shivers went down my spine. What do you mean your grandma wasn't there? I saw her right there with your sisters when they opened the door. The thing is, at this point, I flash back like I was in third person. I remember like she was right there, with her perm gray hair, her night dress with lavender patterns on it. She was a solid object because she was blocking my ex's sister slightly. What got to me more was me remembering the dog moving around her. Her sisters looking at each other and minding their business. Then you get her grandma, who was just staring at me through my car lights. Like when you try and look at the driver on a nighttime and their lights are directly towards you, you can't see the driver. But it's like she could see me, making direct eye contact somehow. It made me feel uneasy the more I thought about it after mentioning it. My ex and my mom thought I was making things up. Only thing is, I'm not and never will be. To this day on, after such a situation, my mind on ghosts have changed ever since I had such a situation with such an encounter. So let's get into the next spooky tale called The Trick. Not my experience, but one from someone I trust. The story goes that they had some kind of creature try and trick him into letting it into the house. For some background, he lived with his parents and his home was pretty secluded, but nearish to the suburbs area at the time, and his mom was home with him and she was in the shower at the time of this occurrence. So the story goes that he was sitting in his room with the window open, doing his regular relaxing thing, when from outside the house he heard his mom call for him, asking him where he put the shirt he had borrowed from her. He didn't borrow such a shirt, and he replied by saying that as much. He thought it was weird that his mother was outside and asking about a shirt, but he wrote it off. He looked out his window and couldn't see his mother anywhere, so he got up out of his room, realizing that the water was still running in his parents' shower. Weirded out, he went downstairs and called out for his mom, and her voice answered from behind the shut and locked front door. He says that her voice was very sweet and tender, using a tone she would have used when he was little when she asked him, "Anon, please let me in." Anon isn't his real name, by the way, just not going to use his real name. Then he says he heard the water shut off from the shower. That's when he heard the sounds of claws rolling down the front door, and the voice of his mother called from behind the front door, again asking to be let in. Followed immediately by Anon, I love you, with the sounds of the claws rolling down the door. He very quickly backed away from the door and went upstairs to retrieve his revolver. But as soon as he came back downstairs, the voice and the rolling claws were gone. No trace, no nothing of who or what it could possibly have been. Okay, so let's move on to the next chilling story, working overnight. I worked part-time as a custodian on my university campus for a while. There were many times when I would be alone in a building early in the morning before any staff or students came in. It was usually a pretty relaxing and chill time to just be on my own like that for a bit. There is one time something weird happened, though, and I still can't come up with a rational explanation for it. So one morning I was working at a building that was owned by the university, but it was off of the main campus by about a mile. Used to be an old middle school, but before the university bought it. It's now used for various science labs and staff offices. I was doing my normal morning routine, and I was going through cleaning all the restrooms in the building first thing at 6 a.m. Now, keep in mind, I'm supposed to be the only person in this building until 7:30 a.m. when people start coming in. When I came in, I unlocked and relocked the door behind me, so no one else could have been in the building. I get to the women's restroom on the far side of the building. I don't bother to knock on the door, as I should be the only person in the building. As I open the door, I see a woman standing with her back against the wall. Now, this particular bathroom is shaped like a T. The stalls are on the long part of the T, So when you open the door, you could only see the sink, and the stalls were out of view behind the corner. So I only saw half of this woman, as the half of her body was behind the corner of the wall that she was leaning on. I just said sorry and explained that I should be the only person in the building right now, so I didn't bother to knock on the door. This woman then proceeds to dash around the corner, and I hear her shut herself inside the stall to the furthest from the entrance. I yelled in saying I was sorry if I scared her, and again explained that I should be the only person in the building. I then hear her start pounding on the door of the stall. Now I'm scared, so I close the door and block it with my cleaning cart. I call my supervisor and explain that there is some woman in the building who has just locked herself in the stall. I thought that maybe she was some drug addict and that somehow snuck into the building at night. So like 10 minutes later, a couple of campus security guys show up. I open the door to the restroom, and the two of them go in with me behind. We all clearly heard and saw this woman pacing back and forth in the stall. The security guys tried to talk to her for a bit to get her to come out. They got absolutely no response. They then say that they're coming in and open the door. All three of us were utterly speechless when the door to the stall opened and no one was there. Later, they checked the building security footage for the previous night and did not see anyone enter the building. I don't believe in anything supernatural, but I still cannot explain this. I worked in the same building before and after this incident probably 30 plus times and never experienced anything weird like this again. On to the next tale, called Hellhound. I saw a ghost dog. Well, Hellhound myself. It was about 15 years ago now. I came out of my room at like 2 or 3 a.m. and I went to go downstairs to use the bathroom. And I looked down the hall towards the other end of the house, which had a bright night light to the left of the room at the end. It cast a light from the stairwell left of the door into the room before it. And I could clearly make out a big black mass laying in the dark, illuminated against the light, about 20-ish feet away in the middle of the hall. It had the shape of a big dog, like Rottweiler size. I froze there in fear, and my mind was racing like, holy shit, what the hell is that? I stood there for a minute or two, then I finally managed to convince my legs to work, and I sprinted the 4 or so feet to the light switch. And just before I hit the light, I saw it move, a flash of what looked like would be red eyes. As soon as the light turned on, it was gone. Never saw anything like it again. 3 more tales to go. Our next tale is called Playing Hooky. So I've posted this before. I don't generally believe in paranormal things. When I was a teenager, I went on a hike to the south central Pennsylvania area of the Appalachian Mountains by myself. I was playing hooky, so there was nobody else there at the small trail, at least that I could see. You had to drive there. There was no foot traffic. I was young and had been talking and singing and horsing around the whole time, totally unconcerned, yelling things off the top of the mountain, etc. On my way down from the mountaintop, I heard my dad's voice call my name and ask for help. I thought I was having a stroke and stopped and almost started to follow, thinking, what the fuck is my dad doing here? Did he follow me or something? And then I came to my senses and told myself, my dad is sitting in his office like an hour or more away. I heard it 2 more times in the space of a minute or two. Call me by name and tell me to come here and help me. It sounded so insistent, like it was urgent, and it was without a doubt my father's voice. I've never ran so fucking fast. I used to do this hike in bare feet, and I remember fucking my feet up hurrying down the mountain. I never went back, and to this day I don't know what the fuck that was. I immediately drove to my dad's office, and he was sitting at his desk working. I don't remember if I told him what I experienced at the time or not. Next up, we got babysitting. I used to babysit my niece and nephew when they were 4 and 5 while my sister went to work. She lived down the street from me, so I would walk down in the morning before she left, before the kids woke up. I got there one morning, and after she left, I laid down on the couch. I heard one of the kids run down the hall, and I immediately pretended to be asleep so they would go back to bed and not get the day started yet. I felt my niece run by me on the couch. Her running sobs shook the floor, and I could hear the trinkets on the sleeves shake. And I felt the wind of her blow by me. Then it was quiet, but I knew she was still there. She leaned over my ear and moved my hair out of the way and laughed in my ear. And I just thought the audacity of this girl. And then she hid under the end table of the couch. Realizing she wasn't going to go back to bed until I woke up, I just got up and looked under the end table. There was no one there. Completely baffled at how she got up and out of the living room in literally 2 seconds without me hearing shook me. So I went down the hall to her room and was starting to freak out. My nephew was sound asleep in his bedroom, and I got to my niece's room. She was sound asleep, tucked under her covers. My heart almost fell out of my body. Now let's move on to our last chilling tale. Not Mother. This story is from a childhood friend who told me this, and it still unnerves me to this day. She was genuinely freaked out, and her family even backed up her claims, so here goes. Basically, my friend and her family moved into this rental property, which my friend said was haunted. It gave everyone an off feeling. Those who visited or stayed over would mention it. I myself experienced this odd feeling of foreboding whenever I went over, and believed the consensus that the house was haunted. It honestly felt oppressive in the house, and you would feel this pitiful dread that is hard to compute into words, and was extremely uncomfortable to experience, to say the least. Anyway, this particular inexplainable event that is the basis of this post was enough for my friend's family to pack up and stay with relatives until they moved out permanently. On this fateful afternoon, my friend had arrived back home from the park and heard an argument taking place in the kitchen between her mom and dad. My friend thought it was odd, as both her parents should be at work, so she called out "Mom" before unlocking the door and going inside. My friend said the house felt instantly silent, an uncanny silence, like all the air had been sucked out of the place, and felt stifling and wrong. Then her mom said, "Hey," and then the friend's name. "We are just in here." My friend was just outside the closed kitchen door at this point and froze beyond opening. It was her mother's voice, but there was something off, like the cadence was missing that made it her mother. It sounded flat and unnatural. My friend decided to bolt back out the front door and wait outside until her brother came home, but she said as she turned back to the house, she saw her mother peering at her from the lounge room window. But it wasn't her mother. The face was the same. Everything was the same, but her face was devoid of anything that made it her mother. There was no recognition on her mother's face. There was no indication that she was looking directly at her daughter. There was no emotion in the expression. Nothing. The eyes looked unstaring and utterly blank. My friend screamed and ran down the street to her mother's work and confirmed that she was still there all this time and had never been home. Initially, my friend's mother reasoned that someone must have broken in, but a later investigation proved nothing had been stolen and the back door was locked, as was the front door, when my friend came home. No one could rationalize who my friend saw in the window and why it looked so much like her mother, but not fully human. So that was the deciding factor to nope the fuck out of there and find somewhere else to live. The landlord of the house denied anything like this happening when they lived there, but did admit tenants didn't stay long, saying there was something wrong in the house. My friend also told me she was the only one who actually saw anything definitively sinister in the house, but her family said they definitely felt an evil presence there, which ultimately manifested into the doppelganger experience my friend had. Utterly terrifying. So that wraps up the chilling tales we have for today. And I don't know about you, but these were some pretty scary ones. The mother one, like, just imagine you're waiting for like your brother to get home or whatever, because you're like, I don't want to go inside the house. Something feels wrong in there. You look up in the window and there's someone looking at you, and it looks like your mom, but your mom's not there. Your mom's at work. That that's not your mom because it looks like her, but it's not her. That would freak me out. That reminds me of this one time. So that wraps up the chilling tales we have for today. And I don't know about you, but these were some pretty scary ones. The mother one, like, just imagine you're waiting for like your brother to get home or whatever, because you're like, I don't want to go inside the house. Something feels wrong in there. You look up in the window and there's someone looking at you, and it looks like your mom, but your mom's not there. Your mom's at work. That that's not your mom because it looks like her, but it's not her. That would freak me out. That reminds me of this one time. So my mom would pick us up after school, and she would use her lunch break to do it. So we'd have to wait a little bit till she got there. We get back home, and my nana, who usually watches or was watching my little brother and my cousin, she was just standing outside, right? Like, why is she outside already? Like, she didn't know we were there, or she didn't know that we were on the way. Well, she knew we would be home soon, but she didn't know like we were already there. But she was already standing outside waiting for us. And so when my mom pulls up, she's like, like, she gets in and everything. They get everybody inside, and she's like that she was waiting outside because when she was inside the house, when my brother and my cousin they were just doing whatever. But she said she looked over, and down the hall that leads into, like, on the left it was the bathroom, then straight ahead it was a room, and then to the right there was a room. But from the bathroom the door was open, and she said that it looked like somebody was looking at her, like it stuck its head out at her, and then it went back in. And she said because she'd seen things before. We've all seen things in that house, but also other houses too. But she'd seen things before, but she said for some reason she got like the worst feeling from it, like just the most like evil feeling from this house, or from that thing that was in the house, whatever was looking at her. So she got the kids as like gently as she could. She didn't like freak, like yell or scream or anything. She got them and said, "Oh, let's just wait outside for your mom." And that's what she did, and it was kind of creepy to have to, because we lived there for a while after too. So it was just kind of creepy living there. You constantly hear people going up and down the stairs outside at night. It just was a weird place. But now I want to thank you all for listening, and please subscribe if you like what you hear, so you get every new episode downloaded. Do you have any strange, mysterious, or unexplained stories? Are they fact? Did you craft a story yourself? If you'd like us to read your stories, you can email them to horrorboxpodcast@gmail.com. We'd love to read them on the podcast. We also like to post those stories on our socials, on Instagram or TikTok, at Horrorbox Podcast. They have the same handle, where we also have updates and news. Also, one last thing. If you like the podcast and would like to support the podcast, buy me a coffee. You can buy me a coffee at coffee.com/horrorboxpodcast. It would really help out. We'll see you next time and hear what comes out from the horror box.